Hey, author bosses, it's Megan coming at you live from Author Like a Boss, and I'm going to get us shared up into the Author Like a Boss Facebook group. If you're watching this live somewhere besides that group, make sure you come join us in the Author Like a Boss Facebook group. We have writing tips and marketing tips with the fabulous Ella, and a really great community. So if you're not in that group, you should be. You're missing out. All right, today I'm going to be chatting about central conflict. And before I get started, can y'all give me a mic check? Let me know if you can hear me. Am I coming through loud and clear? Send me an emoji. Send me some love. Is anybody out there in the big wide internet? All right. And let me know if you can hear me as well. So, central conflict. Ooh, why? Because it's huge. It's hugely important. No matter what genre you write in, if you're going to author like a boss, you have to have a killer central conflict. It's the difference between a story that drives forward with momentum and one that just fizzles out. And you might have experienced this not just in reading, but in writing. Have you ever started writing a story and you couldn't get past the beginning? Or maybe you got to the middle and then you got stuck? Let me know. Tell me in the comments. Have you had that experience of like, oop, I don't even know where to go from here. It's not working for me. If so, you're not alone. This has definitely happened to me. I love starting stories. It's taken me a lot of years to get the discipline to finish them. But you start with all this momentum and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna write this great story. And then somewhere in the middle, you're like, ooh, what happened to all of that excitement? Oh, hey, Mike. Hey, Cassie. Hey, Carrie. Great to see you guys. Okay. Yep. It is such a bummer to get stuck in the middle. So all this month, that's why I've been talking about how to avoid that feeling of getting stuck in the middle by crafting a killer central conflict. And today I'm going to recap creating a killer central conflict, and then I'm going to be answering questions that people have been posting in the Facebook group throughout the month. So you ready to dive into that? Sound good to you guys? Here's what we're going to cover today. We'll go back through just in general creating an inspired central conflict, that word inspired, what it means for your central conflict, why it's so important. We'll talk about the 3-point plot map, and then we'll talk about building your rising and falling action. And I'm just going to give quick recaps of all of these because they've each gotten their own video. Those are all on our YouTube channel for you guys to check out. And then I'm going to end with doing a Q&A. So sound good? Y'all in? You ready for this? All right, let's do it. Okay, so an inspired central conflict. I really just think it's so important to think of your central conflict as your reason for writing. So it's, yes, your conflict is what your main character wants and can't have, right? It's what she's trying to get. And for your main character, that's something concrete. So like she wants to survive being in the Hunger Games, but she doesn't want to kill anyone if she doesn't have to, right? Like that's a very concrete conflict. You can write that story. But you can build, your plot around that, but you have to look deeper to find what you're going to be inspired by, right? You, the author, should be exploring a really big question that interests you, and that question might be, what would happen to a tyrannical and manipulative empire if people just stopped playing along, right? That's like the big question behind the Hunger Games. Now, you can't plot that question. You can plot the question about what happens if you are in the Hunger Games and you try to survive without killing other people. But that inspiration is really your important first step, because that big question is what's going to keep you writing on those hard days. So you have to take the time to get inspired before you jump in and you're like, I've got this cool plot and all this action is going to happen. Take the time to get inspired. And that inspiration is something you can do step by step. We have a whole course on it in the Author Boss Academy so that you figure out how you can connect with your story. So does that make sense to you that you need those 2 layers of conflict? You need that concrete conflict, of course, so you can build your plot, but you also have to have something that's really drawing you to your story. Let me know if that makes sense to you. Does that resonate with you? That, oh yeah, I would get more energized if there was some big question I were exploring. Yeah, okay. It's really a game changer. If you haven't been creating an inspiration connection for yourself with your plot, it's a game changer. It's something that will keep you invested in your story. So once you've got that conflict, you have to build your 3-point conflict map. And the 3-point conflict map is something that's just going to keep you from getting lost, right? You're not going to get to the middle of the story. So first strategy is you won't burn out because you're inspired. You're like, I really want to answer this question. Second strategy, get a map, right? You put enough gas in the gas tank. You're not going to run out in the middle of the road, but now you need to know where the heck you're going. All right, so your 3-point conflict map. Point 1 is your inciting incident, and it's what draws your main character into this conflict and points her toward a certain course of action, right? Like what gets her in and points her someplace. Well, the place she's pointing toward is the next point in your plot map, and it's your climax, the moment of greatest tension. And this is going to happen about, 3/4 of the way, or 5/6 or 7/8 through your story, but you have to know what it is right from the get-go. You don't have to know all the details, but you need to know what the nature of that big confrontation is going to be. What will your main character have to face? And if you've got that big question in mind, coming up with what is in your climax should be a lot easier. Okay, so your 3rd point then is going to be your resolution. How does it all end up? Does your main character get what she wants? Why or why not? And what will she do next? Those 3 points are going to keep you from getting lost or going someplace that doesn't work, because you know where you're headed, you know where you're going to end up right from the beginning. And you got to do all 3 of those. You got to map out all those 3 points before you start writing. And it's crucial, right? That's really, for any of you who get lost in the middle, this is such a crucial step. But as I mentioned, you don't have to know the exact details. And that's why the courses in the Author Boss Academy around your plot are going to help you create certain landmarks and must-haves, but you're not going to get locked into details. So it's a really powerful kind of planning. Knowing these 3 points before you start writing maps out that entire conflict, and it keeps you from getting lost in the middle. So let me know, does that make sense? Can you see how knowing these 3 points, knowing where you're going to end up, and knowing the moment of greatest tension, would that help keep you on track? And let me know, do you already plan this way? Do you map out these 3 points? Hey, Sarah, glad you're here. Is this something that you already do in your writing, or is this something you can see yourself doing in your writing, mapping out those 3 points? Well, let me know what you think. Okie doke. After you've created that 3-point plot map, you got to fill in some more details, some more steps, and you'll do that with your rising and your falling action. Rising action is just what happens on the way to the climax. And it incorporates both your exciting plot points that intensify the danger and also the challenges and changes for your main character so that she can grow into who she needs to be by the time the climax arrives. Rising action can be a little overwhelming because if you feel like anything might happen, then there are tons of choices, right? Like, what should happen? Oh, I don't know. So I've got all of the options. It's like being in a frozen yogurt store. Too many choices. But that's why in the Author Boss Academy, we like to get you started with some common patterns and recipes for rising action, because choosing one of them will give you a framework, and then it's a lot easier to plot your story and know where you go next. You're like, oh, I'm doing a building experience pattern, or I'm doing a collecting characters pattern, and that will narrow down your choices. So after you plot your rising action and your falling action, you're going to need to do one of them first. I would say do your rising action first, but I recommend doing them around the same time, because your falling action is basically going to wrap up loose ends. And so it's handy to see what issues you brought up in the rising action. You're like, what conflicts did I open, right? Let me close those up, or plant seeds for how they're going to be continued in the next book if you're writing a sequel. So it's handy to plan these together. Plus, when you plan your falling action, you're preventing yourself from getting stuck in the middle. So if you write, you're like, oh, I got my rising action and I'll just start writing now, then you might get stuck and go, I'm not sure how to solve these problems. But if you create problems and solve them at the same time, then it gives you the momentum to get over that hump in the middle. And since you already know how to handle the climax, you already know what's coming between them. That's planned. You planned your climax first before rising or falling action. So you got it together. You know it. And then you know how to get to the end because you've got that bridge. It's really powerful to know how your story is going to end. Does that make sense? Can you see why having your ending in place is really powerful? It's like when you're taking swimming lessons and you're a kid and there's the edge of the pool there and you're like, if I can just get there, or I don't know, maybe there's a person standing there. I was not a very good swimmer. I had to swim to a person. Like, I can go 1 foot. That's it, guys. I'm still a terrible swimmer, but I wouldn't have done it at all if there hadn't been somebody standing there for me to get to. So knowing where you're going, or seeing the finish line of the race. All right. So that's a recap of what we talked about with Inspired Central Conflict. Again, each of those topics has its own video. So I invite you to go check them out. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you can get our new videos whenever they come out. So now I want to really dive into Q&A. And I want to hear your questions about central conflict and about plotting your novel, so I can give you some specific answers. And over the course of the month, a lot of you have been putting your questions about central conflict on the pinned post in the Facebook group. So I'm going to start with answering those questions. And if you have a question, please put it in the comments and I will get to it as well. And remember, if you want to get notified about when we go live, you can do it by just clicking on this link. Put that in the group as well. Okay, I'm seeing some questions start to come up. So let me get to those. Okay. Oh, I'm not seeing questions yet. I'm seeing comments. So let me jump in with the questions that people put on the pin post. But again, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. Okay. So Brittany said, I worry I won't write enough detail to build the world I have in my head. I also worry about my story not flowing right. And Brittany, what I would recommend is to use elements of your world in your rising action. So I'm not sure what genre you're writing in, but what does your main character have to contend with? And these might be literal parts of the setting, you know, like you have to get through Mirkwood Forest and it's full of giant spiders and wood elves and terrible things like that. Or it might be conditions like, you know, Katniss is fighting against the unfairness in the setting that she's in. So it could be literal or could be more like ideas. But if you use those as the rising action, that'll do two things. It will make sure your world is in your story, and also all your points of rising action will be connected back to the setting, so you're going to get better flow. I would try that. Alexia says writing epic battle scenes is a challenge, and eventually a war. Oh, writing epic battle scenes and eventually a war aren't things I'm exactly practiced at. I'm not either. What I would highly recommend is read a bunch of epic battle scenes, read war scenes, and even watch them, because this is just a pattern of storytelling. And, you know, thinking about, you know, big action epic movies like Braveheart or the Lord of the Rings movies, you know, they'll give me a few characters to focus on and it just keeps cutting among them. You know, how's Gimli doing? How's Legolas doing? What's Aragorn? Oh no, I'm gonna get hate mail. I just name blanked. You know, but it's like, give us those few characters and cut back and forth among them. But go read some examples would be the best way to do that. Mary says, My celebrity comes off as too wholesome. I tried to make it seem like the press played up his rock star side, but that he's actually just a kid trying to be a good person. Instead, he seems unbelievable as a character. So having a character who's a good person can sometimes be a real challenge. How do you make that person seem real? And the answer is to make him vulnerable. And you don't have to make him vulnerable by having a weakness. He doesn't have to have a dark secret. Here's my number one trick for adding vulnerability, Mary. It's giving a character a heart's desire, because when we truly, truly want something, there's a possibility we won't get it. And that makes us vulnerable. So if there's something he really is like in his heart of hearts wants, that will help us connect with him. Plus, if he is a celebrity, maybe he hasn't been able to pursue this thing because maybe, he hasn't had as much control over his life. So that would help us empathize with him as well. All right. Sarah asked, when it comes to plot, should you have 3 acts like a play, or 4 acts, or does it matter? Either one is just a framework. You could also have 5 acts. That's the structure of a tragedy. It's really just what works for you, and knowing the purpose of each act would be the most important thing, Sarah. So if you know what that looks like in 3, if you know what it looks like in 4, if you know what it looks like in 5, go for it. Just make sure you know the purpose of each one. Thank you, Cassie. Aragorn. I know. I was like, oh, how am I not remembering the name of one of the main characters of The Lord of the Rings? Okay. Oh, hello, Marina. Hello, Trish. Hey, Mike. All right. So keep your questions coming. Harmony said finding a tangible motive, and Jen had a similar question, fleshing out individual characters' motivations for action. So if you're struggling with motive, here's what I would say. Your first priority is figuring out how you need characters to behave to move along the plot, especially if this is not your main character, right? If these are minor characters or supporting characters. So first, make sure you know what they have to do to keep the plot going. But then what you can do is draw separate character arcs for each character. You don't have to spend a huge amount of time on them. Just kind of sketch it out and ask, where does this person start and where is she trying to get? What's her movement going to be? And then that can help you, match up people's character arcs can go together. Oh, I need a scene where these 2 people are going to, be doing something, and it will it'll tick off like that on her character arc and this on his character arc. Okay. If you have trouble drawing those, then the next layer of research I would recommend is doing some free writing. Take on the voice of that character and do an I wish free write. And just explore. The reason to free write is because you're going to tap into a different part of your brain. You're going to tap into a more intuitive, creative part. And so if you're having trouble thinking it through analytically, you may need to just switch tactics and look for answers that you might know unconsciously but don't know consciously. Tom says, making the stakes high enough. Also, conflicts not feeling repetitive as the series progresses. And Tom, what I would suggest is create a series arc. And however many point plot map. It might not be 3 because maybe you have more than 3 books in the series, but however many that is, and create those as your acts. We were just talking about acts. So it might be 3, it might be 4, it might be 5, you might be J.K. Rowling it and it's 7, but create the whole series arc and think about there's going to be a rise and a fall, and some of these books probably will leave us in moments of tension. Think of The Empire Strikes Back. We're in the 2nd act and things seem pretty low. So if you look at it from an arc point of view, then it's not that each thing has to get more intense. It's that we have to be moving toward some kind of big resolution, and definitely map out what that big resolution is first. Charlene says, my concerns are how my storylines will be received. And you might mean something different than this, but I want to just address this because I think a lot of people worry, is this story going to be good? Is it going somewhere? Give people a satisfying ending by planning out that 3-point plot structure. Make sure you think it's going somewhere satisfying, and that's going to ensure an ending that feels like an ending for your readers. So I'm going to keep going through. Melissa says, pacing out the conflict is a balanced way that keeps the reader interested without giving away too much is always a challenge. Yup, definitely. I feel you on that, Melissa. So what I'd recommend you do is you find the beats of your story, and those are going to be emotional steps on the ladder up, from your inciting incident to your climax, and then throughout your climax, if it's a longer scene, and then down to your resolution. Where do you want your character to be kind of emotion, character development wise? And that will help you, create the level of tension in your plot as well. And once you know what those beats are, I would say put them on note cards or put them on sticky notes or even put them on a whiteboard so you can start arranging them. You can figure out how you want to step us up to your climax and step us down from it. John says, I worry that, as before, because of its scope, the novel will again face delays. It was started back in 1997. I have a few chapters and characters' locations and most of the backstory. Oh my gosh, John, I feel for you. That is a long time to be working on a story. So if you haven't already, create your 3-point plot map. Make sure you know where this is going. And if you're finding that it's growing and growing and growing, consider turning this into a series. Consider making this more than one book. The power of creating that 3-point outline and then starting to fill in your rising and falling action is sometimes you look at what you've put in and you go, that's a lot. That's more than one. And dividing it up will be really powerful. And then so that you can create what would be, the ending point for the first one and go from there. But that's, if your project is continually growing in scope, I would say mapping out the whole thing with that 3-point plot would be a really powerful step to take. All right. Deanne says, will it be good enough to sell? And I bet this is a question a lot of us ask about our books, and it goes beyond just central conflict, right? It's like, this is kind of the big question that we all want to know. And I would invite you to reframe this, Deanne. What if you asked instead, will it be specific enough to sell? The change in that thinking would be, you're asking, am I telling a story that says something concrete? And this goes back to creating an inspired central conflict. Am I telling a story that answers a big question? And we'll never know how other people will like our stories or react to our stories. But if you change it and ask, is this a specific enough story? You can answer that. Good is so amorphous. I don't know, is it? But specific, you know whether you've done that job. And again, it goes back to getting inspired. What's that big driving question that you're going to answer? And then using that plot map to make sure you answer it. You've got a resolution. All right. Jennifer said, I don't do a lot of violence and I want to allow a certain peacefulness to run through the conflicts and turbulence. I'm okay with peril for my hero, though I want her to stay true to her strength as a growing leader, as nurturer / strong, assertive girl. So basically, though I love Marvel heroes, this isn't that, but I want the conflict and action to stay exciting for the reader. What an interesting, I like that approach. I'm not a big fan of violence either. So keep in mind, Jennifer, that emotional stakes can really grip readers. The book that comes to mind to me that was really, I don't know, so powerful for me as a kid was A Wrinkle in Time. And the emotional stakes are so high, but the final battle is Meg facing off telepathically against a giant brain. Like, you can't get more out of the realm of fisticuffs than that. It's like one brain against another. But the tension and the drama are really powerful. And it's not simply because it's a young adult book. I mean, it's not as if, that's exciting for kids, but it's not exciting for adults. If you go back and reread this as an adult or read it for the first time as an adult, I think it's just as exciting. So if you can really make it clear what the stakes are, that's what gets us excited. Because on the other side of that, a really action-packed, violent scene or fight where we don't know whom to root for or we don't know what's going on, totally boring. You're like, yeah, okay, there's swords and there's guns, but I don't know who's doing what or why it's important. So it's really the stakes. It's what's at stake for your character that will create that tension for readers. All right. Marina asks, in a series, one book per character as main character if characters have extraordinary long lifespans? Ooh. You could certainly do that, a character per book. You could have dual protagonists if that works thematically for you. What would you want to get out of switching protagonists? Is this kind of like each character gets her own story and the other people become the supporting characters? I don't know. Tell me a little bit more, Marina, about them having extraordinarily long lifespans and why that's coming in as a question. Certainly this is a way to go. It's just each book in the series is one character and we get that person's point of view. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the joy of a series, right? Is then we get to learn more about a different character. Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow come to mind, where the timeline is the same, it's overlapping, but the second book is following a character we met in the first book, but we get to see his backstory and understand where he came from in his origin story. Yeah, it's definitely a good way to do it so that we get more connected with each character. And that's also a great way to explore different themes, because depending on who the character is, they'll have different, approaches to life, I guess. So yeah, sounds good. Julie says there are a lot of subplots happening. So what I would advise you to do, Julie, and anybody else who's looking at a lot of subplot, is to think about subplots as events in the rising action and the falling action of your main character's arc wherever possible. So if this is a character that your MC interacts with, how can you make that interaction, that subplot, part of something we need? Your main character is going to learn a new skill or is going to face a new challenge connected to that subplot. And if they don't intersect, think of them as places to control the pacing or to reinforce themes. That will still ensure they're connected to your story. And when you're looking at these other subplots, other things you want to have happen, you go, oh, well, if that came in here, that would be a nice slowdown after this big tense scene my main character just went through, or whatever it is. So think about using them that way for pacing. Adrian says, my concern in writing my central conflict is portraying it so others understand its complexity without being confused. It's a complicated internal conflict. So Adrian, I would say definitely create your beats. What's your main character going through? Put them, first just maybe write them all down, like brain dump them all. What are all the different things that she's experiencing? Then you can put them in order and create the arc. But if you're really clear on the arc, then you'll be able to write it for readers in a way that we understand. Rana says, I have a habit of not fully forming my conflicts in my own mind until it's too late and my work gets a little lost. I am the picture perfect example of a pantser. Well, Rana, here's what I would say. If you plot using that 3-point plot map, you only need to commit to 3 points, right? What will keep you from getting lost is just those 3 points. And that leaves you a lot of wiggle room, because I know that for some people, the joy of writing exists in the jumping from one known to the next and not being sure what's in the middle. They're I'm happiest when I'm kind of flying like that. In fact, you know what I just learned recently? That the term by the seat of your pants, flying by the seat of your pants, comes from the old days of flying planes, before instrumentation, and you would literally feel what the plane was doing in your bum. You would you would feel the little movements if you're, I don't know, whether you were dipping or sliding or your yaw, all those terms. I thought that was so cool. So even though it's very cool and daredevilish to fly by the seat of your pants, you now have instrumentation and you don't have to do it. So there's no point being unsafe. Get those 3 points, those 3 plot points, your inciting incident, your climax, and your resolution mapped out so you know where you're going, and then you'll still have wiggle room. I think that's a good compromise. And, a little bit of your rising action filled in, a little bit of your falling action. And you can experiment with how much is the right amount of planning to do. But if you already know the answer, Rana, because you're already saying you're getting lost. So give something new a try. Joel says, not having enough representation in my characters / the story isn't well received for its intended audience, due to the topics covered. And this would be a place where making sure that your plot and your character arc feel really authentic would be important. So not every book is for every reader. They're going to be like, I pick up a book and go, oh, this has a lot of, woodworking in it. I'm just not interested. That was a bad example. I'd be interested in woodworking. But there's just going to be topics where we're like, oh, whatever, I don't care, or it's not for me, or I'd rather not read about it. Okay. I know what mine is, like grisly murder. I'm like, no, thank you. So that's, put that aside. Then go, okay, there is an audience for my book. There are people out there who are interested in what I'm writing about. How can I get them invested in it? And that's through the story. It's through helping them connect through the characters by creating that arc that feels authentic, that draws them in, where they go, yes, that is the conflict that somebody would need to, or that is the, the big choice that somebody would need to make in the climax. And that ending does make sense given what this character has been through. So mapping out that plot and making sure that your character is moving along an arc that feels authentic, that will speak to people who are your ideal readers. Hey, Cassidy. Okay, Mike. Oh, it comes from the early days of rowing. The seat of your pants? Grease the seat of his pants to slide back and forth while rowing. Yes. And thank goodness for that wooden slide. Otherwise, we'd all have greasy butts. But pantsers, I'm just saying, flying by the seat of your pants was what people used to have to do. And I bet a lot of them didn't make it out of the plane because of it. So consider a little bit of instrumentation in your plane. You don't have to fly blind. Chaco says, making sure it's complex and layered enough. And Chaco, what would help with this is planning your rising action step by step, like a ladder, so that you take readers to the ultimate confrontation in the climax a little bit at a time. And again, to do that, first you got to know those 3 points. You got to know the climax you're aiming toward, and then you can subtly go, okay, here's the first step that would take us through the second step, and build it like a ladder. A lot of the difficulty that comes with feeling like things are rushed, or there isn't enough detail, or it isn't believable, comes from not having your plan in place. And so you don't know where you're going, and it's just kind of stumbling blind, like, oh, I guess this could happen over here. Whereas if you know where you're heading to first, your first destination being the climax, boom, 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 you can work up to it slowly. And same thing down to the resolution. All right, Levi says, my biggest concern is making sure I have enough research and knowledge of this particular cancer and treatment options so that my main character's journey is believable. What an important thing to bring up. If you're writing about a topic that a lot of people have personal experience with, you definitely want to get your facts right. And especially for a very sensitive topic like this, you wouldn't want people to feel as if it won't be taken seriously. So here's where mapping your rising and falling action would be really powerful, Levi, because once you have the events and challenges in mind, but you haven't written them yet, right? They're just sitting there in your outline. You can research those specifically before you draft so you don't get trapped somewhere unrealistic. You go, okay, I have this idea in mind that I want there to be a scene where this happens. You can start doing your research around that before you've committed to drafting. Ooh. So again, the power of building that 3-point plot map and getting your rising and falling action in there. So those were the questions y'all had put on the pinned post. I want to invite anybody else who's watching, if you have some questions now, you want to put them in, go ahead and do that. so we can wrap up about central conflicts. And I also just want to tell you a little bit about the Author Boss Academy because I mentioned it a couple of times. The Author Boss Academy is the academy that Ella and I run for author bosses. And it's a 24/7 online portal with writing and marketing courses, everything from plotting your novel to editing without going crazy, to sending out your author newsletter, to engaging on social media. Plus, we have weekly live coaching calls, and each week you'll get either me for writing questions or Ella for your marketing questions. And these are deep dives where you submit your questions ahead of time and we take you through detailed answers and give you action steps. So imagine instead of just like me taking 30 seconds to answer a question that you had typed in, if we talked about it for 15 minutes and you were live there on the call with me and could ask follow-up questions. Plus, the Academy is a private Facebook group where you can get support, accountability, and answers to your questions in real time. And it's a monthly subscription for $59 a month, and you get all of those things. All right, so if you want to hear more about the Author Boss Academy and how to author like a boss, you should join us for the live webinar we are doing tomorrow. I'm going to put the link in the comments. Okay, and I'm not seeing any more questions, but if you guys have questions, definitely make sure to put those in. All right. And make sure you join us next week as well. I am going to be talking about book blurbs. That will be the writing topic for the month of March. And Ella is going to be wrapping up the videos she's been doing on engaging on social media. And I know a lot of people have questions about social media, and Ella is just a superwoman at telling you what you can do to be more effective and really be engaging with both your ideal readers and other authors so that you can do fun things like build your launch team. So make sure you join us next week for those. And if you want to get notified when we go live, where did I put that link? I will put it in again. I lost it in my notes. There we go. Okay. Yeah, if you want to get notified when we go live, this is super handy dandy. You can click on this link and you'll get a Facebook Messenger notification. Okie dokie. I hope we get to see you on the live webinar tomorrow. And until then, I wish you all a very happy Thursday and happy writing. Bye-bye.